Your alarm clock this morning was around 80 decibels. The blender you used immediately afterward registered closer to 90. If you've ever stood next to a poorly tuned motorcycle revving at a red light, that is about 95. A rock concert, assuming you are standing close enough to the speakers to actively damage your gene, tops out around 120. At this level, your chest feels the pressure wave as much as your ears hear it. A jet engine at takeoff, if you were foolish enough to stand directly on the runway, reaches roughly 140 decibels. At that point, you're standing inside a physical force capable of permanently altering your hearing. Now take that entire scale you just built in your head and toss it in the bin. In 1883, one single, unmitigated geological tantrum produced a sound so extreme that some rough calculations suggest it could have been around 310 decibels at the source. It behaved like a physical hammer, rupturing human eardrums from 40 miles away. It circled our entire planet 4 times before it finally ran out of energy to terrify humanity. This is the absolute loudest sound ever recorded in human history. And as our completely unbothered friend on your screen is about to demonstrate, your entire concept of loud is nothing more than a rounding error. To understand this event, we must travel to the Sunda Strait in Indonesia. Here, a small volcanic island named Krakatoa sat doing what volcanoes do best. Absolutely nothing, until it decided to do everything. For several months in 1883, starting in May and ramping up through August, the island had been throat clearing. We are talking minor eruptions, some casual ash drifting over the shipping lanes, and a bit of steam. It was the geological equivalent of a minor infrastructure delay. Local sailors passing through the strait noted the activity in their logbooks with the same mild annoyance you might experience when encountering roadworks on your daily commute. But on the morning of August 27th, the island stopped clearing its throat and decided to aggressively delete itself from the map. At exactly 10:02 am, the final of 4 massive explosions occurred, and it removed 2/3 of the island's entire mass in a matter of minutes. Millions of tons of stone were shattered and launched straight into the stratosphere. Sound produced by this final blast is still the benchmark scientists use whenever they need to describe an event of absolute, unmitigated physical violence. This is where the numbers stop making any sort of intuitive sense. 40 miles away from the blast, a British merchant ship named the Norham Castle was sailing through what it assumed was a routine morning. When the shockwave arrived, the captain wrote in his logbook that the noise was so violent that many of his crew suffered ruptured eardrums. The damage came from air pressure alone, pushed hard enough to physically tear the inside of a human ear from 40 miles out. At the source of the eruption, some rough estimates put the sound at roughly 310 decibels. To understand why that number is ridiculous, you have to look at how sound actually works. Sound is just air molecules bumping into each other. Earth's atmosphere has a strict hard ceiling for how loud a sound can physically get. That ceiling is exactly 194 decibels. 194 decibels, the low-pressure valleys of the sound wave reach an absolute vacuum. There is physically no more air left to compress. If you try to force more energy into a sound wave past 194 decibels, the air literally tears. Wave stops behaving like a loud noise and turns into a supersonic shockwave, a solid moving wall of kinetic energy traveling faster than the speed of sound. Krakatoa broke the atmospheric physics engine. That shockwave kept going. Over 3,000 miles away, on the isolated island of Rodrigues, the local police chief officially logged what he assumed was heavy cannon fire from a massive naval battle out at sea. There was no battle. The nearest ship was thousands of miles away. What he was hearing was a geological event on the other side of the Indian Ocean, still loud enough at that distance to sound like artillery. Put that in perspective, is the equivalent of standing in London and clearly hearing a handgun fired in New York. While the human ear could no longer detect the sound after a few thousand miles, the Earth itself certainly could. Barograph stations and weather hubs across the globe instruments designed to track tiny shifts in atmospheric pressure suddenly began registering massive spikes. The first wave hit Calcutta in 8 hours. It hit Vienna in 11 hours. It hit Toronto and New York in 15. Then, the pressure wave did something no one expected. It kept coming back. The shockwave left Indonesia, traveled to the opposite side of the planet, bounced off itself, and headed back toward the volcano. Meteorologists in London and Washington, D.C. watched their delicate barometers spike, settle, and spike again. The waves circled the entire globe 4 times in one direction and 3 times in the opposite direction. For about 5 days straight, many barometers across the world were violently spiking as the planet's atmosphere vibrated. Krakatoa had turned the entire Earth's atmosphere into a giant bell, and rung it with a sledgehammer. Of course, nature does not operate with a moral compass, and the aftermath of this event was predictably grim. The displacement of the island triggered massive tsunamis, some reaching over 100 feet in height. These colossal walls of water completely erased over 160 coastal villages across Java and Sumatra. Official historical records put the death toll at 36,417 people. This number is widely considered conservative, as local administrative records were not exactly built to survive a tectonic reset button, but the planet wasn't done playing with its new toy. The millions of tons of sulfur dioxide and ash launched into the stratosphere did not all fall back down immediately. Instead, they caught the high-altitude winds, spreading across the globe like a dirty blanket. For the next year, sunlight passing through the atmosphere was heavily scattered. People in London and New York reported witnessing vivid, blood-red sunsets. In fact, these sunsets were so intensely bright that local fire departments were frequently dispatched because residents genuinely believed their cities were on fire. The suspended ash also blocked enough solar radiation to drop global temperatures by 1.2 degrees Celsius the following year. One single Tuesday morning in Indonesia, and the entire planet ran measurably colder for 12 months. So, the next time you find yourself complaining about a badly parked motorcycle, a loud neighbor, or your morning alarm clock, just remember our smirking stick figure friend on the screen. Your entire concept of loud is a fragile, delicate bubble protected by a very thin layer of atmosphere. Krakatoa is the quiet, geological reminder sitting in the rock record that the planet can, at any given moment, decide to clear its throat and shatter your eardrums from a neighboring continent without asking your permission first. At least you wouldn't have to go to work the next day. Subscribe for more comforting science updates.